Going to introduce our first speaker, who is Dana Payne. Dana serves as Director of DEI Initiatives, Diverse Cultures and Heritage for the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. In this capacity, she's responsible for the management of the Folk and Traditional Arts Infrastructure Program, management of the agency's nationally recognized Preserving Diverse Cultures Division, and the development and implementation of agency diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Dana has over 20 years experience as an arts administrator, project manager, lending her experience consulting with local, regional, and national arts organizations in the areas of artist management, residency and production management, and special event coordination. Payne is dedicated to providing artists and organizations with the support, tools, and resources necessary to achieve sustainability and creating and fostering initiatives based on the principles of diversity, cultural equity, and inclusion. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dana.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great, great. Thank you very much. My role within the agency includes managing our Preserving Diverse Cultures Division and our folk and traditional arts infrastructure program, as well as guiding the agency through the development and implementation of our comprehensive DEI plan. I'd like to provide a little background information about our agency for those who are not familiar with the PCA. The agency is in the Office of the Governor and was created by an act of legislature in 1966. We are governed by 19 council members, 15 of which are appointed by the governor, and the remaining 4 are members of legislature. This is a sort of exciting time here at the PCA. We're in the second year of our new 2019-2024 strategic plan. We've developed a new mission, which is to strengthen the cultural, educational, and economic vitality of Pennsylvania's communities through the arts. Our chair is Jeffrey Parks of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and our vice chair is Jeffrey Gable. Our cross-cutting value is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we have established 3 main goals. The first is to strengthen Pennsylvania communities through the arts. And that is providing support for arts programming that engages Pennsylvanians throughout the Commonwealth in experiencing the arts and exercising their creativity, investing in community-based art projects that serve as catalysts to livability, economic development, and community connectedness, working with public and private sector partners to build cross-sector collaborations to advance shared goals, and to preserve and promote Pennsylvania's diverse cultures and cultural heritage. Our second goal is to connect and increase Pennsylvania's access to lifelong learning through the arts. So we support arts and education to cultivate future innovators and build essential skills that promote success in school and career readiness. We advance quality of life for Pennsylvanians of all ages through arts learning and creative endeavors. And then our third goal is to champion public awareness and appreciation of the arts and culture in Pennsylvania communities. We inform and engage the public about the value and impact of the arts. And we encourage Pennsylvania's artists, art organizations, and creative industries capacity for marketing and sustainability. And we recognize and celebrate the arts and Pennsylvania's artists and art organizations as contributing to the Commonwealth's prosperity. So we fulfill our mission and accomplish our goals through a range of activities, primarily through grants to the arts. We are a grant-making agency. We make grants to, We have 2 very relevant resources for arts and cultural organizations that are posted on our website. So the first resource is coronavirus-related resources to help artists, arts and cultural organizations, and creative entrepreneurs. And the second resource is the PCA Tips and Resources Guide for Reopening Safely. Those two documents are updated a few times a week and can be accessed via our website. So we award over 1,400 grants to the arts for individuals and artists and organizations offered by the above divisions. And these grants are administered directly by the PCA or through one of our regranting partners. You also engage in partnerships and initiatives. The Arts Marketing and Audience Engagement Initiative is a capacity building program created and co-presented with Americans for the Arts, National Arts Marketing Project. This initiative supports, strengthens, and advances the arts marketing and audience engagement skills of the Commonwealth's arts and cultural professionals. Our Creative Communities Initiative, this is a new initiative, and it provides multi-year funding to community-driven arts-based projects that serve as catalysts for livability, economic development, and community connectedness. And projects in Sharon, Meadville, Lancaster, and Philadelphia have been selected for the pilot phase. And then our statewide partnerships. Our statewide partnerships is a network of nonprofit partner organizations, each who manage a multi-county region and provide technical assistance, arts and discipline related activities, information, and some also help to administer our grant. So these statewide partnerships cover all 67 counties of the Commonwealth. And then preserving culture. So more specific to preserving culture, the PCA supports the work of individuals and organizations through programs offered by our Preserving Diverse Cultures Division and our Folk and Traditional Arts Infrastructure Apprenticeships Program. So we diversify our geographical and cultural reach through the nationally recognized Preserving Diverse Cultures Division, which was established in 1979. The division supports the development of projects, programs, and organizations whose mission is deeply rooted in and reflective of BIPOC perspectives. That is an acronym for Black, Indigenous people, and people of color. And the images that you see are images from some of the organizations that we have supported over the past 40+ years. So Preserving Diverse Cultures offers 3 opportunities for funding. One is the Strategies for Success Capacity Building Program for organizations. Another is the Community-Based Engagement Project Grant, and that could be for individual artists, members of communities that want to get together and collaborate on an arts and cultural project. And then based upon availability of funds, we're also able to provide technical assistance and professional development grants. The image that you see is of representatives of our Strategies for Success organizations. This was taken at the Asian Arts Initiative in Philadelphia during a 2-day capacity building training. Strategies for Success. So Strategies for Success, it's a multi-level, multi-year capacity building program that addresses and supports organizational development for arts and cultural organizations through implementation awards, technical assistance, professional development workshops, and conferences. Participation in this program is based upon 3 levels of organizational readiness, and an organization has the potential to participate in this program for up to 11 years. Funding at each level is dependent on panel recommendations and an annual evaluation. So I mention this because within the context of what we're discussing today is that many of these organizations focus on this work too, preserving heritage and a strong organization, a sustainable organization is better able to do that work. And this is what Strategies for Success supports. And then this is community-based engagement project. So this program provides communities with the opportunity to collaborate on the development and implementation of artist-led arts and cultural projects. So the intent of this program is to provide opportunities to bring constituencies within communities together through arts and culture and collaboration. This opportunity often serves as an entry point for artists and communities and small arts and culture organizations. It serves as an entry point for other PCA funding programs. The key themes of this program is that it is artist-led, that it's community-based, that it's collaborative. And the image that you see is of a mural project that was done in Pottstown. And then we have folk and traditional arts. The Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, we foster excellence and continuity in the folk and traditional arts throughout the Commonwealth. Folk and traditional arts are arts that are shaped and shared within families, neighborhoods, and communities. They are passed down from one generation to another and learned through, excuse me, ongoing participation in community-based activities and through observation or imitation of master practitioners. Traditional artists, through their creativity, excellence, and dedication, reflect each community's history, practices, beliefs, and values. Their work thrives because it is a powerful expression of their community's experience. The images that you see are of apprenticeship projects. These are projects between master artists and apprentices. Our folk and traditional arts infrastructure consists of a folk arts partnership, apprenticeships, and then services to the field. Our partnership is a system of local and regional organizations that form a mutually supportive network and specialize in or include a focus on folk and the traditional arts. The partnership organizations currently collectively serve 32 counties and engage in work and present activities that enhance the visibility, access, and support of folk and traditional arts across Pennsylvania. These organizations provide technical assistance and professional development opportunities for master artists, apprentices, teachers, administrators, and community leaders through workshops and gatherings. And our apprenticeship and traditional arts program grant supports the learning of traditional arts within cultural communities across Pennsylvania. Each grant award provides funding for over a one-year period to a partnership between a master artist and a qualified apprentice, enabling them to work together for in-depth learning that encompasses the acquisition of techniques and artistry as well as the context of the culture. Apprenticeships are offered on an annual basis in both performing and craft traditions, and the program makes awards of up to $4,000 per project, and apprenticeships may receive a maximum of 4 grant awards. Our grant applications are due usually during the first quarter of the new year, so the first quarter of 2021. Due dates and application guidelines for our grant programs would be available later this fall and will be posted on our website. We also announce application and guidelines via email and on our PCA Facebook page. In the event that this is a lot of information, but if you have any questions and would just like to discuss any ideas that you have, please feel free to reach out to me. You can also visit our website and reach out to any of our staff members to talk about our funding opportunities. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dana. There was a lot of good information there and some opportunities that I have to confess I wasn't even aware about. So thank you for sharing that.
That's great.
Again, a reminder, if anybody has any questions as we go along, please feel free to put those into chat and we'll address those at the end of the presentation. We'll also open the floor for conversation at the end of the remaining three presenters as well. Our next presenter is Dr. Jennifer Garcon. Dr. Garcon is the Digital Scholarship Librarian and former Public and Community Data Curation Fellow at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. She has been an organizing committee member of Archives for Black Lives in Philadelphia since 2019. Her work is focused on developing archiving and preservation initiatives geared towards protecting and safeguarding historic data in communities experiencing gentrification. She, as a member of Archives for Black Lives in Philadelphia, has worked on local community archiving efforts and programming and is a planning member of the forthcoming Hometown Treasures program, which was unfortunately postponed due to COVID, and is in partnership with the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Council on Library and Information Resources, and the Free Library of Philadelphia. Jennifer?
Yes, hi, thank you. Thank you guys so much for the opportunity to present here today. So I think I will follow Dana's lead and turn off my video while I share. And so, okay. So hi, everyone. Again, I'm Jennifer Garcon, and I am speaking to you today as a part of Archives for Black Lives in Philadelphia, where I've been working alongside them very closely as a steering member since 2019, but have been a member of the organization since I moved to Philadelphia in 2018. And so I'm going to share some of the work that we've been doing in and around Philadelphia around preservation of historic community documents, and talk a little bit about how we've approached partnering with local organizations and individuals in support of their ongoing efforts, not only to collect, but also to preserve local memory. So just a little bit about my two organizations. Am I still sharing?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Okay. Yeah, so just a little bit about my two organizations. So I'm sure many of you know of University of Pennsylvania, which is a well-resourced and large institution in Philadelphia. And perhaps fewer of you might know about Archives for Black Lives in Philadelphia. And so who we are is a loose association of archivists, librarians, and allied library professionals who are in the Delaware Valley region, and who have committed to responding some of the issues raised by the Black Lives Matter movement in the archival profession. So as an organization, we're really aiming to advance anti-oppression and anti-racist values within our own profession, particularly within our region. We've been a part of many projects. One of the projects that I think is most interesting to talk about is the Archives for Black Lives anti-racist description resources, which is really thinking about the ways that academic institutions in particular need to recognize and attempt to remedy some of the harm caused by racist, offensive, dismissive, and otherwise erroneous descriptions that often appear in archival collections about marginalized peoples. And so as trained archival professionals, we've approached this call for action in a various, in several ways. And I want to kind of go through them in process just because it makes sense, I think, for this presentation. But one of the things that we've done is find ways to leverage the resources that are at our disposal as members of library institutions to support and amplify and to try to make some sustainable change that supports the active archiving and reclamation work that communities in Philadelphia are doing. So one of our earliest projects in 2018 was supporting the community-based archival collection of Rashida Phillips, who is a Philadelphia-based public interest lawyer, author, and community activist who founded both Black Quantum Futurist Collectives and the Community Futures Lab, both in North Philadelphia and the Sharswood region. And so pulling out expertise of our members, we work to provide direct assistance by processing Phillips' extensive archival collections, in which we helped create metadata schema, developed records management policies, and provided advice on digital preservation. And the goal therein was to help her preserve her collection in a way that was most sustainable for the future use of other researchers, other activists who could then really maximize the work that she had spent doing very diligently over the prior decade. So we also worked with Taller Puerto Ricanos, which is a Puerto Rican cultural heritage institution in North Philadelphia. And so they were beginning to take steps to preserve an NEH-funded community oral history project from the 1970s that had captured the voices of first and second generation Philadelphia residents of Puerto Rican descent. And while they were incredibly rich historical resources, they were housed on audio cassettes, which was increasingly becoming an outdated material form. In their case, outsourced digitization projects would have been prohibitively costly to the organization. And so myself and a colleague, Coral Solomon, who is of Puerto Rican descent, went about working closely with the staff at Taller Puerto Ricanos to develop both a metadata schema, description guide, digitization workflows that could be used at scale to digitize their collections as volunteer labor became available to them. We were also really intentional in making sure that we were creating bilingual resources such that it was really geared toward the potential users of this material. One of the things that we did in terms of thinking about the resources that we had available on our end that could support is using Penn servers to host a proof of concept website that would then allow Taller Puerto Ricanos to successfully seek grant funding to digitize the most vulnerable part of that collection. And so as staff members of often very well-resourced institutions, the members of Archives for Black Lives Philadelphia are deeply committed to finding ways to use our access to resources to support community-facing projects. So I have been the co-lead on a Penn project called Remember Black Philadelphia for about 2 years. And it's a multimodal digital scholarship project, but has since evolved into a community archiving project as well. And it's thinking about documenting Black life and culture in Philadelphia, and is deeply supported and really revolving the work of a professor on campus, Professor Crystal Strong, who is a native Philadelphian. And so we have designed the project such that it is deeply multi-generational and is really interested in capturing both historic Philadelphia and also contemporary Philadelphia. And so we've worked with the school district of Philadelphia's PSTVs, multimedia students, to provide them access to spaces to develop a micro documentary project with us, including a collaborative classroom space at Penn, and mapping resources, including ArcGIS taught by our GIS specialists. And the students were asked to kind of think about their neighborhoods, think about the underlying kind of structural decisions that lead and influence the way they move about the city, and create micro documentaries about their lived experience of those things. We partner with the Free Library of Philadelphia also to host digitization days, wherein we brought preservation expertise, equipment, and resources to communities in West Philadelphia. So this project was modeled after existing library initiatives, including Culture and Transit in New York, the Northwood Tours in Wisconsin, and Archivists in a Backpack out of UNC. And so the goals of many of these projects is to discuss preservation of historic material, but also to provide access to the resources needed to facilitate preservation, including scanners, archival boxes, sleeves, folders, etc. So we're not only having conversations about keeping materials safe, but also providing some of the means for which individuals can go about doing that. And so these were really popular events for us. We hosted them in the Blackwell Library branch in West Philadelphia. We had 3 scanning stations, and participants would sign up for 30-minute sessions with an archivist to digitize material, to seek expertise around preservation, and often and importantly, to share stories about their lives in Philadelphia. The last part, I think, was a bit of a surprise to us. And we have since, with permission from the participants, began an oral history component to the project that seeks to capture some of these amazing memories. So I'm a digital scholarship librarian, and so one of the projects that I've been working on, in addition to developing the workflows for these kinds of public-facing digitization events, is providing access points to the materials with the permission of the participants involved. So creating ways to both pool historic documents, to create a narrative that is community-led about neighborhoods, particularly Black neighborhoods in Philadelphia, has been really important to me. We've had the opportunity, I think, to leverage our projects and really scale them up by really thinking about how to engage partnerships within the individual members in our organization. So we have an ongoing project with the National Museum of African American History and Culture to bring preservation programming in the form of their Hometown Treasures education program to Philadelphia. This was supposed to have been scheduled for July 2020. It was postponed to next summer because of COVID. And so it's, I think, anybody's guess whether next summer will actually happen. But the program would not only create a space for existing cultural memory institutions to display resources, to engage with the public, to engage with members of the Smithsonian's preservation team. It would also be a 2-day-long expo wherein people got to bring their treasures, seek support in preserving those materials. Also get things like archival boxes, folders and sleeves, and a really comprehensive training was supposed to take place during that day. We're also working with the Library of Congress. And one of the things that we're doing with the Library of Congress is trying to figure out a way to create a cost-tiered guide to community conservation, fully recognizing that folks have amazing, amazing resources in their attics and their basements and their homes, and yet some of the costs, the quoted cost for conservation is prohibitive in terms of making sure that material is properly protected for the long term. So doing some of the groundwork that allows folks to make intermediate steps towards preservation of historic material is something that I think is really important and something that we've been working with the Library of Congress to develop support for.
Jennifer, I hate to interrupt. I just wanted to give a 2-minute warning.
Okay, yeah, I'm wrapping up. So I think by way of conclusion, funding, right? I want to say that for Archives for Black Lives in Philadelphia, we operate on a shoestring budget. While there is institutional support in the form of our own professional development time and resources, that remains uneven and is up to the discretion of our respective library leaders. I myself am very lucky because part of my job duties is doing this work. But a lot of our work and the continuity and feasibility of the work is really reliant on volunteer labor and grant funding. So I wanted to conclude by calling your attention to some of the places to start looking for resources to do similar kinds of projects. Mellon recently, I think 2 years ago, started a community archiving grant. They're now in their second round, and it's a really great place to start. The Council on Library and Information Resources has a Digitizing Hidden Collections grant that's been actively encouraging non-university entities to apply. And that includes local libraries, humanities councils, and science institutions. NHPRC has a public engagement with historical records grant that's been awarded in the past to historical societies and public libraries. The Leawood Foundation has small grants towards community engagement in the area. Nonprofit repositioning grant offers technical resources and financial support to nonprofits in support of changing environments. And I think the last and most important one is DocNow, which has an archivist supporting archivist program that provides assistance to individuals who are hoping to create archives by connecting you with trained professionals who are committed to non-extractive and non-racist ethical practices to archiving. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Again, a lot of great resources there. Hopefully everybody's able to write those things down, and we can certainly pass that information along to you afterwards. Again, remind you to type any questions into the chat, and we're glad to have conversation after the presentations. Our next presenter is Lori Zierer, who joined PHC, Pennsylvania Humanities Council, in 1995 as a program officer, and after playing a number of leadership roles in the organization, was named executive director in 2012. Over the years, she's produced Humanities on the Road with PCN, Humanities Live with WHYY, the Speaker's Millennium Lecture with Frank McCourt, and statewide initiatives like Our Stories, Our Future. In addition, she has directed award-winning projects like Raising Our Sites, Community Histories of Pennsylvania, and Storyline. Lori?
Oh, thank you so much, Josh. How's my sound?
Great.
Oh, super. You know, I want to thank you and Cindy and, you know, Jennifer, I've learned so much. And Dana, I learn something new every time I hear you speak. You know, before we start talking about resources in Pennsylvania, where you can go for help, I always pause and say, wait a minute, there's a lot of know-how and talent right here in this Zoom room. And I think I want to pause, and it feels like it's the right time in a series of presentations to take a pause and talk about that. And so bear with me because I see some people that I know really well, and I am so honored to have worked with them. I'm going to shout you out, Margaret Gerardo, who I did an internship many years ago at Temple Urban Archives and learned everything that I know about archives. And also folks like Ms. Twyla Simpkins, I see you, that has worked with me as part of a project called Chester Made. I gotta build a playlist with you because I know there's a lot of know-how in the room and resources here about this topic. So what I want you to do, and I want you to think about and get ready to go into your chat, is community engagement. What song comes to mind for you when you think about community engagement? What song would you want funders to hear about the work that you do with community engagement? Now, what I'm going to try to do, because we create these playlists all the time, I'll play a little bit of music from one of our playlists while you're in the chat. Tell us your song, and let's share the resources that we have. Play along with me. I hope that you could hear that. And I have to tell you that by doing this, I can't see the chat function. Isn't this funny? Can you see my slides?
Yes, Lori, we can
Yes.
see your slides.
Okay. All right.
I don't see that anybody entered any songs yet.
Oh, they didn't.
No. Oh, wait, we got one.
Okay. All right. Can you tell me what it is? Because I
Morning,
can't see the chat. You know, this is what, you know, you always make these great plans in Zoom.
all right, we're getting a couple. We got
All right.
morning dance.
Oh,
Spira
great.
Spira.
And any others?
This Must Be the Place by the Talking Heads.
Oh, I love that.
And we have We Are Family.
Excellent.
Anybody else have any suggestions?
Well,
He ain't heavy, he's my brother.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
People
Thank
Get
you.
Ready by Rod Stewart.
Oh, good. Keep them coming in as you're thinking of them. You know, I love, you know, on this playlist, I think mine was I Hear a Symphony. But I love the, you know, the lyrics in Shining Star. You're a shining star no matter where or who you are. Shining bright is see what and see what you could truly be. You know, I really believe that about the work that I do. And we believe that at the PHC, that everyone has a story to tell. And it's the power of those stories and people and their talents and know-how that are the best resources and power that you can have. No doubt about it, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a grant opportunity today with the Pennsylvania Humanities Council. But what I have learned is that the dollars are not the most important part of any project. It's the people that are involved and that are leading them. And what we do is we work with residents to collect stories and to do this work. So our mission at the Pennsylvania Humanities Council is to put the humanities and people and stories in action for positive change for people and community in Pennsylvania. We focus on education, community development, civic engagement, and advocacy. We just simply believe that people have stories that can light people's minds and hearts for action. We do this as a nonprofit. Unlike Dana's Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, we're a nonprofit, and we're a federal state partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. So let me talk a little bit about how people and stories have driven our work and the grant opportunity. And think about your playlist as we're going, because this is what life's all about. It's about sequencing and shuffling the ideas and the resources and network that we have. So here we go, because our playlist started with a project called Chester Made. And Twyla, if you want to say anything about this project, please jump in on the chat room, because I'm probably missing a lot of this. Twyla is a resident of Chester and has worked closely with me on this project. Chester Made started our playlist, and it really started with the residents of Chester. We were invited in by the city of Chester and Widener University as part of the Chester Cultural Corridor project. It was a very high level idea about how to connect all the cultural assets in Chester to create economic development in the community. And we were asked to hold some town hall meetings to really tap into what people thought about arts and culture in the community. And as part of that project, what we did was, with residents, collected stories about what was most important about arts and culture in the community. And we did that throughout the city, and on the basis of those stories, and folks putting them on a map, very similar, Jennifer, to the project that you had discussed. We created, I'm sorry for it's a little pixelated here, a cultural asset map. The cultural asset map really drove policy thinking about community and economic development, as well as the kind of programming that has happened as part of the project with Chester Made. I think what's most so important about this project is that it was led by residents. Stories were collected by residents, and they made the story of what this project in action was all about. So with Chester Made, we learned quite a lot and knew that this kind of work, that for it to be resident-led and to do this kind of work across the state, we needed a great partner. And Community Heart and Soul, which is a initiative of the Orton Family Foundation, was one where we knew that we would have a really dynamic partner to be able to push us to take a method that was story-based, resident-based, that put stories in action for community development. And we began with that project with a number of partners across the state. And as you hear these examples that I'm going to give, I think the most important one from the Cumberland County Historical Society, you'll see the power of people and stories to really drive these projects. This is a resident of Mount Holly Springs, right outside Carlisle. This is a story about Mount Tabor Church and Harriet Gumby, who had a powerful story to tell. In in Mount Holly Springs, when the Greater Carlisle Project started collecting their stories, Pam Still, a borough manager, knew that there were some important stories, and she reached out to Harriet and Edna, you'll see on the right there, and she learned about a church that was actually in the Gumby's backyard that was built by Harriet's grandfather, Elias Parker, a former enslaved person. He was from Hagerstown, Maryland, who had fought in the colored troops. Not only built a church there that was an anchor in the community for the African American community, but he and a number of folks were buried in a cemetery that was right beside there. This story, when it was found out by the community, really generated more stories and such support to preserve the church. In fact, also as part of genealogy, there were some descendants who got involved. And you can see some of the photos of the preservation of the church. Locally, Dickinson College got involved, and it went and really moved forward. That not only is that preserved, but it became a really shining example of what a whole community could do to save and preserve that history, as well as really transform the way the Cumberland County Historical Society thought about itself and the way that worked with residents, not for, to collect history. And so that's one story out of many of the power of stories in people. People were at the head of this. Was there money involved? Yes. But in the end, the volunteers and the residents were at the front of this. I'm going to give some more examples of the power of people and stories to propel projects forward. This is another community heart and soul project. These are two Lycoming College students. They were involved in the Heart of Williamsport project. That's Christopher Sizek and Sophia Herzig. They were involved in collecting and interviewing. All of their interviews that were put on videotape became short vignettes that were collected and shared with the community and became a full documentary that was premiered to 300 plus in the community as part of a celebration of a collection of stories. I remember when the premiere happened, and it was just, it felt, I remember in the paper, folks saying how that documentary really showed how Williamsport was up and coming. And I got more examples. It goes on and on with every project that we've done with Community Heart and Soul. This is Michael and Tanya Reed in Meadville. When they started the project and collecting stories, everybody in town kept on talking about how in the community, remember when we had this diner, this place, we came together and we talked. And as those stories were collected, Michael and Tanya heard them and said, it's time for another coffee shop. It's a time for a place for people to gather together. And they started with a pop-up, and that spiraled into a crowdsourcing. And here they have today their own coffee shop. It's called the French Creek Coffee and Tea Company. It's named after an important local waterway.
Sorry to interrupt, Lori, about 2 minutes.
You got it. Cameron County, here is Jessica Herzig. She's been a project director for that project, and her time is actually donated by a local nonprofit. And in Carlisle, Sophronia Perry, who got involved in Cumberland County Historical Society's project. She had youth that was part of a project at Hope Station who learned how to collect stories and then use those skills in order to tell their own stories of racial bullying and take it to the local school district. And most importantly, very recently, Heart of Williamsport, all of the resident that collected stories got involved with local artists at Factory Works, and thanks to Pennsylvania Council on the Arts with some funds, collected stories around Factory Works to create this beautiful mosaic. So what's the grant opportunity that's coming up for Community Heart and Soul? We're going to be unveiling in October at some workshops, an opportunity for communities that are along Route 6. Of course, there's a number of counties that spans the entire state to get engaged with Community Heart and Soul. As part of that, we're offering 2 virtual workshops. Tuesday, October 6th, Thursday, October 8th, and boy, do we have a lineup. Look at all those folks who are going to be talking about their experiences and their projects in Meadville and Williamsport, and we'll have our own folks from Jen Danifer from the Pennsylvania Humanities Council, as well as Leanne Tingay from Community Heart and Soul. The grant opportunity, the applications will be due in November. I think it's November 18th. And folks will find out by the end of the year if they're selected to become a Community Heart and Soul town. And that would be for projects that would be starting in 2021. There's funds that come with this, of course, from the PHC. We put in $25,000. The Pennsylvania DCD matches that, and included with that comes a lot of technical resources that I've heard, we've calculated, valued at least $50,000 from PHC as well as Community Heart and Soul to support resident-driven story collecting and really putting this entire project together. I hope that you consider this project and also, how people, it's, the playlist that's in our room, in our Zoom room, and the playlist that you create with folks in your community, how a couple dollars make a difference, but it's really, it's the residents and the people that you work with that drive it forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori. And boy, I have to follow that one, huh? No, that was great. Thank you. And one of the things we've been hearing throughout the series this week is hearing about stories and sharing stories. So I thank you for providing that context to what otherwise is just a grant opportunity. So that's wonderful to hear. We are running a little bit behind. I'll try and move quickly. I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to answer questions at the end. And I certainly appreciate everybody conveying their little pieces today. I think as an archivist, this week I've spent a lot of my time trying to listen to the challenges and experiences and the needs that we're hearing from communities and community groups and individuals. And we're really thinking about how we at the State Archives can be a resource. And as our director, David Carmichael, alluded to in some of the earlier sessions, it might be a little bit presumptuous for us to tell you what to do or what to collect. But there are a few things that I think are important that we can do. And some of those things are to tell what is profession as a profession over the last decades that we've learned to help ensure that materials remain preserved and accessible, both for your families, for the communities at large, and as well as for future researchers. And also what we can do to offer financial support for projects caring for those materials that tell your stories. whether those are the oral histories that we've heard of, the photographs, diaries, letters, family papers. You know, I suspect we'll be looking at ways that we, again, at the State Archives and the Historical Museum Commission, can accommodate those projects even more in the future. And third, I just want to make the point that we hope to be a friend to you, to be able to help you preserve your stories. So hopefully these slides that I have and a few things that I want to talk about will help make those things reality. And the two primary things I want to share today, first is Archives Without Tears. David already mentioned, this is a workshop that we do, and I'm gonna say this is synonymous with guidance. I mean, maybe you're looking to care for materials that are already in your possession. Maybe you're looking at just beginning to collect materials, or maybe you're even at the point where you're considering to start your own community archives, or maybe working with an existing repository. These are all things that we might be able to, again, glean some guidance from the Archives Without Tears workshop. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And the second is the Historical and Archival Records Care Grants, which again is funding for assistance to help you achieve those goals. Again, thinking about the order here, I think Archives Without Tears, it makes sense to be the first step. This is something, again, we call this a practical workshop. You can see in the text there, it's a practical workshop for those working with historical records. So this isn't exclusive to professionals in the field or individuals who have been trained or spending years working with records. Again, this is for anybody that's working with historical records. It's relevant for anybody who might just be getting started, and you know, not to discount the fact that it's a good refresher for those who do have a little bit of background as well. But again, it's practical guidance, sort of an A to Z about archival principles at that very practical level. It's a 2-day workshop. We usually hold it in the spring in May or June. Unfortunately, this year, because of the pandemic, we were unable to take it on the road. We are looking at developing some sort of AWAT Lite modules and components that address some of those key areas. So if Ty, if you could drop the YouTube link or the PHMC YouTube channel link in the chat, those modules will eventually be posted to that PHMC YouTube channel. There's also some other resources that might be fun if you have some time to check out there as well. But the Archives Without Tears workshop, we aim for those to be affordable. The 2-day session, including lunch, is only $30. And we're able to do that because we have support from the National Historical Publications and Records Commission. But again, that's one of the things that we aim to do, is to keep this affordable and accessible, because we're really trying to reach those who need that training. And some of the things you might expect to learn about at Archives Without Tears, and let me back up. I should just say, essentially, I think there's 3 tenets of archives that are universal and really apply, again, to anybody who is collecting or working with records, again, whether that's the individual or all the way up to the largest institution. And that is the mission to collect, preserve, and make available. And again, really, that's the intention of Archives Without Tears, is to give you the tools to do those things. So again, whether that's to learn how to begin collecting, if that means talking to your relatives, other community members, descendants of maybe prominent individuals or individuals identified that are important to your group's history. We would talk about proper housing for your materials, what acid-free supplies are, why they're important, what acid migration is, and what it does to documents over time, why it's important to consider the environment, especially keeping materials out of the attic and keeping materials out of the basement. And generally speaking, again, at that practical level, if you can keep materials at an environment that's comfortable for people, it's probably going to be fairly comfortable for your records as well. Again, we'll talk about why it's important to avoid exposure to sunlight and ultraviolet light, as it causes things to fade and become brittle, and keeping things off the floor to avoid moisture and certainly any flooding or otherwise unintended situations like that. So if Archives Without Tears is meant to give you an understanding and a basis, again, of those sort of fundamentals that we as archivists do to make sure those materials can endure through time, The Historical and Archival Records Care Grant is going to offer funding and resources for you to be able to begin implementing or pursuing those goals. So again, you can see here, primarily this is for projects improving the preservation of records significant to Pennsylvania, and I might even add to that records that are significant to the history of Pennsylvania residents and communities. Again, this is something that we want to be as inclusive as possible. Ty, if you could drop the link, the description of the Historical and Archival Records Care Grant, the webpage, the announcement. This is open until October 1st. That doesn't give you a whole lot of time this year, but maybe it's something you can consider. Maybe you have something in mind that you were looking for funding. I would encourage you to check it out and take a look. And if not, hopefully we'll have funding next year, and we would anticipate hopefully that would go live for a call for applications in July of next year. So the grant offers $15,000 or up to $15,000 per project. Grants that are $5,000 or less do not require matching. Grants $5,000 and one and up do require matching. And it's a 50-50 match. And what that means is if you ask for $10,000 from PHMC, you must provide $10,000 in match to reciprocate that. And in-kind matching is allowable, which again would account for staff time or otherwise time being devoted to the project. And they are direct awards, meaning that they're not grants that are reimbursed after expenses. They're grants that the funds are given up front. So in 2017, our State Historical Records Advisory Board petitioned the Historical Museum Commission to reinstate funding for archival grants. And we've been fortunate to be continuing that. In 2018, we had 60 applicants, which 16 were funded. 2019, we had 54 applicants, which 29 were funded. So we're doing a little bit better on numbers there. And this year, again, the opportunity closes October 1st. We have $150,000 available. And as I mentioned, we're hopeful that we'll be able to offer the grant again next year. Generally speaking, we're looking to reach nonprofit organizations with historical or archival collections, but to go along with that, of course, there's some musts and shalls. Those organizations must be in Pennsylvania. They must be able to prove their federal nonprofit status, must be incorporated or existing for 2 years prior to submitting your application. And I hope that these don't discourage you if you or your group or your community might not meet these terms. There's always ways that you could consider maybe collaborating with a group that does, or working with others otherwise. And if you have questions about that, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I would be glad to discuss. Just some examples of recently funded projects. Again, I want to mention that records can mean a lot of things, as we've heard over these last few days. One important distinction I have to make for this grant is we cannot provide funding for projects that would be dealing with artifacts, primarily meaning things like jewelry or clothing or even things like tombstones. What we're looking at are photos, oral histories, diaries, letters, maps, family papers, business records, church records, and those types of things. And I want to be clear that those can include various formats such as audio visual materials and even digital materials as well. And you can see on the slide here, I don't want to read slides to you, but there are a few examples here of some recent grants that were funded. Just to give an idea, there are various types of projects that are possible, and this list is by no means comprehensive. We just have some examples here. Certainly building partnerships and networks to support your collections care and accessibility, and I hope that this conversation is part of that. Surveying, inventorying, arranging, and describing materials. Digitization, so maybe you have materials that are in a vulnerable format, whether that's your VHS cassettes, audio cassettes, or otherwise, or again, even photographs, making those materials available online electronically. Conservation work, sending materials out to have them conserved. purchasing those traditional archival supplies that I mentioned, the acid-free containers and so forth. All the way down to, we may not consider it, but disaster mitigation is an eligible activity here as well. As I mentioned, applications are due October 1st. Ty, if you could drop the link to the ESA application. This is where you would go to actually register to apply for the grant. Everything is done electronically and submitted through that package. And as you can see, this is an actual 2-year grant program, so you have 24 months to implement your projects. So in a nutshell, and I know that was a little quick, but I want to make sure there's time for everybody to comment. This essentially sums up those 2 opportunities. And again, I want to mention that we're aiming to be a friend to the communities and to the ambitions and goals. So if there's anything that we can do, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and be in touch. We've learned a lot from all the participants these last couple days, and I certainly want to say thank you to everyone who's participated. And again, I just encourage you to not hesitate to reach out to me, whether it's in regard to the HART grants, the Archives Without Tears program, collections care in general, or even if you have questions about facilities and environment and spaces and things of that nature. My contact information is here. I mean that sincerely. Please don't hesitate to reach out. We truly strive to help ensure that your stories are preserved.